Hi everyone, I'm Miranda and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm chatting about some great books to read in September. Some of these will be books I want to return to myself, some are books I think you'll love, and some of them are reads that are on my to-be-read pile for September. So I've got quite a stack, including some vintage books, some new books, some non-fiction as well as fiction, and I can't wait to share all of them with you. But yes, like I said, I've got a big stack, so let's get started. First up, I have to mention my comfort book club choice for September, and that is Period Piece by Gwen Raveratt. This is a charming memoir about an Edwardian childhood spent largely in Cambridge. Gwen Raveratt was a famous artist and she was also the granddaughter of Charles Darwin. So she came from a really fascinating and quite academic family as well. And this is just a very sweet, charming and entertaining story about her early years. So I'm really looking forward to reading it for the book club, and I'm looking forward to all of you who are reading along with me. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think of it as well. So obviously I'll be rereading this book in September and I can't wait to chat about it at the end of the month. But for me, September is so much about the nostalgia of childhood, about looking back on your early childhood, on your school days too. And also the setting of this memoir of being mainly in Cambridge also seemed very fitting to me. That collegiate atmosphere as well seems a great choice for back to school, back to university time. So yes, I hope you enjoy reading this along with me, and I have to also mention that on my Instagram at the moment I have a giveaway of Period Piece in a beautiful edition by Slightly Foxed. I don't know if you can see the spine here, but Slightly Foxed are a wonderful independent publishing company. They republish classic memoirs in beautiful cloth-bound hardback cover editions, and they've very kindly teamed up with me to offer 2 of my followers the chance to win a copy of Period Piece. My copy has red boards. I bought this ages ago, and this is a limited edition which has now sold out. So the copies that are up to win actually have a blue cloth-bound cover, but it's also a really lovely edition. So I'll put the link to my Instagram with the giveaway in the description box just down beneath, so you can check that out if you haven't entered already and if you would like to. But yes, so that's what I'm really looking forward to getting to in September. And then speaking of a collegiate atmosphere, I know so many people love to read books like The Secret History by Donna Tartt at this kind of year, but one of my very favourite books set at a university is Gordy Knight by Dorothy L. Sayers. This is a book in her Lord Peter Wimsey mystery series. These are some of my favourite Golden Age mystery books. I really love them. And in this book, Harriet Vane, who is Lord Peter Wimsey's love interest, plays a really vital role. This is much more her book really than Lord Peter Wimsey's book. So it's a bit of an anomaly in the Lord Peter Wimsey canon, but I really love it. And it's about Harriet Vane, who is herself a writer of mystery books. I think Dorothy L. Sayers put a lot of herself into Harriet Vane's character. And Dorothy L. Sayers went to Oxford, and in this book she has Harriet Vane return to Oxford, to her college. And while she's there, she's carrying on some work and research, but she becomes aware of the fact there are a lot of poison pen style messages going around the college. No one knows who is sending them, And in fact, some of this venom is directed to Harriet Vane herself. She, of course, is an all-female college, and she decides to try to find out who is at the bottom of this and why someone is attacking all of these female professors. So it's an unusual mystery. It's not a murder mystery. It is a mystery, but it's about so much more than the actual kind of mystery in this book too. A lot of it is to do with Harriet Vane and Lord Peter Wimsey's burgeoning relationship. And that's one of the reasons I enjoy this book so much, is there's so much depth of character that you get in Dorothy L. Sayers' writing that really comes out in Gordy Knight, and I think it makes it stand out amongst other Golden Age mysteries. So this is a real favourite of mine, and of course I love reading about the atmosphere of Oxford in the interwar period. It really is so interesting for me. So one I love to return to in September. Then I picked up this book recently, The Reading List by Sarah Nisha Adams, and I thought this sounded just the sort of perfect cozy type read that I want to curl up with in September. I love books about books, and so hopefully I will enjoy this. It's about a young teenage girl and an elderly grandfather who come together and form a sort of unlikely friendship through the discovery of a reading list that the young girl finds in a library. So it's really about a friendship formed over a love of books. And that sounds like just my kind of thing. I love books about books and the joy of reading, so I'm hoping I will enjoy this one. I don't know too much about it because I picked it up just based on the blurb, and I thought it sounded like it will be one I'll enjoy. So yes, in September I'm looking forward to curling up and getting cozy and reading this one. If you're in the mood for some more cozy reading in September, then I highly recommend Business as Usual by Jane Oliver and Anne Stafford. I've mentioned this book a few times before on my channel, but why I'm mentioning it again is because it starts at the very end of August and goes on through September and October, and the first part of the book is in fact called Autumn, and then it goes on through the year. But there's a lovely autumnal start to the story. This is a book that's written in letters, which always pleases me, as I love letters. And it's just a very funny, light story. Again, it's set in the interwar years. It's about a young woman who has recently become engaged, but before she gets married, she decides to move to London and have a go at earning her living, which was a more unusual choice to make in those days. She ends up getting a job at a big department store, which is a thinly disguised Selfridges, and she ends up working in their book department. So again, this is a book about books a little bit and about working with books. And as I've worked in a couple of bookshops in my life, I really enjoyed it for that reason. But I love the heroine in this book too. She's very good-natured, very funny, and I love the way that she discovers a real passion for her job and for pursuing her own career in this book as well. Her romance hits a few knocks along the way, but at the end there's a very satisfying ending which really ties everything together very nicely, I think. So yes, very much recommend this, and if you haven't picked it up yet, then this is a great time to do so, as it's the perfect time of year to start reading it. Then this book I think would be lovely to have on your bedside table in September, and it's Tales from a Village School by Miss Reed. I know so many of you are big fans of Miss Reed and her tales of village life, of school life. They're such gentle, cozy reads of a bygone era. And this one is a selection of short stories. And there are some short stories in this that I think would be perfect to read in September, ones like Harvest Festival and Michaelmas Fair. And I think that this will definitely be on my bedside table in September. It's just the sort of book I love to pick up and just dive into and maybe read 1 or 2 short stories before I go to sleep. So I would recommend this one. And then another very charming story that starts in September is Anne of Windy Willows by Ellen Montgomery. I love reading Anne books at any time of year, frankly, because they're generally full of wonderful descriptions of all the seasons and of nature generally. Ellen Montgomery is such an incredible nature writer. But Anne of Windy Willows does actually start in September. It starts with a letter from Anne to her new fiancé, Gilbert. I think the letter is actually dated the 13th of September, or the 12th of September. And Anne has just been made principal of the school. So again, I feel this is quite a good September read because it is very much about school life, about Anne's new role as a principal and all that she encounters with that. So I hope to reread this one in September myself. Then another book that I often return to in September, and I love to listen to this one as an audio book, that's Cat Among the Pigeons by Agatha Christie. This is a murder mystery that's set in a school, so great for back to school season, though hopefully no murders in reality, but it's just quite a fun one for this time of year. I always like listening to Agatha Christie. I generally listen to at least one of her books every month. In October, for instance, I love to listen to Halloween Party, but in September, I generally choose Cat Among the Pigeons. This is a book that I've heard praised so much, and I'm really looking forward to reading it myself. It's A Long Way from Verona by Jane Garden. They have a quote from the book on the back. It says, "I ought to tell you at the beginning that I am not quite normal, having had a violent experience at the age of 9. And I think the book is written in the first person, and the voice is a sort of schoolgirl. It says, Jessica Vi's violent experience colours her school days and her reaction to the world around her, and a confining world of order marks, wartime restrictions, Viola dresses, nicely restrained essays, and dusty tea shops. For Jessica has been told that she is beyond all possible doubts a born writer." It just sounds like a really interesting book. Like I've said, I've heard really good things about it. That quote from it really intrigues me. It sort of reminds me a bit of Cold Comfort Farm, you know, with the line from that, the famous line of having seen something nasty in the woodshed. But there's also maybe hints of almost a Shirley Jackson type character, like from We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what to expect of this one, but it really intrigues me. So definitely hope to read this. And again, about the schoolgirl, sort of set in the school, so a good September read. Then a very famous example of a book about a teacher and her pupils is The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark. I don't know why, but I also always seem to want to pick up books set in Scotland in the autumn. Somehow Scotland just seems like a very autumnal place to me. So I think doing a bit of Scottish reading is great at the start of autumn. And as this one is a bit of a warning story, actually, I feel, about the teaching profession, I think it would still be a great choice to pick up in September. Muriel Spark is such an intelligent writer that I think I always enjoy returning to her books. Even though they're so slim, you always seem to pick up more each time you read her novels. So yes, this one I think would make a great choice for September too. And then a few books that actually have September in the title, so they'd be great reads for September. The first one is The Last September by Elizabeth Bowen. And this is really a coming of age story, but it's also about political upheaval in Ireland. And it's about really the end of an old world and the burgeoning of a new world. And I love Elizabeth Bowen's writing. I think she is such a talented writer. And I don't think this one is known as well as The House in Paris, for instance, but it would make a great September read. Then there's September Moon by John Moore. Speaking of slightly foxed previously, they have in fact republished a few of John Moore's memoirs, which are excellent, but this is one of his novels. I don't think it's in print anymore, sadly. This is a vintage edition, but this is really about hop picking in September I think it's in Wiltshire, Herefordshire. It's set, and it's about all of the different communities and people that come together for hop picking season. But there are some lovely descriptions of sort of September early morning mists and drinking cocoa and things like that. So yes, and again, a good choice for September. Then there's The Fortnight in September by R.C. Sheriff. This was our book club pick last September, so you probably know already that I'm a big fan of this book. It's such a gentle, lovely story about a family holiday by the seaside in September, but R.C. Sheriff is such a talented writer. He just captures this feeling of really quite a simple story and simple pleasure amongst a very ordinary family, but he just captures it all so poetically, so well, that it really draws you in and you feel a part of the family. And there are so many little details that I remember after reading this. I've read it 2 or 3 times in the past, and it still is a real favourite of mine, so highly recommend it if you haven't read it yet. Then there is Rosamund Pilcher's September. I know Rosamund Pilcher is such a favourite writer for so many, and September is one of her classic books. If you're a fan of The Shell Seekers, then you'll recognise one of the characters from that book making an appearance in this. And it really builds up to a big ball that happens in Scotland in September. But there's all these family dynamics and relationships sort of going on. It's got a lot of the typical trademarks of a Rosamund Pilcher book. It's quite a cosy read, but there's also some sadness and tension underneath the surface in this. And again, it's one I quite like to listen to as an audiobook each September. It sort of just sets me in the mood for the start of autumn. So yes, another one I recommend. And then I wanted to actually share a few children's books. Let me just reach for the pile, and then I'll move on to non-fiction choices. But this one is one I'm really looking forward to reading. I've just started it, in fact, and it's Crooked Sixpence by Jane Shaw. This one begins in September. It's published by Girls Gone By publishers, and Jane Shaw wrote a lot of books for children. She was a very popular author. This was first published in 1958, and it's just been republished by Girls Gone By. And it's about a group of friends who help solve a mystery. One of the friends' father owns quite a bit of land just outside of Bath, and it becomes clear that someone really wants to buy one of the fields, and the father doesn't want to sell, and when he won't sell, a very peculiar haunting of the field starts to happen, and it's clear that someone is trying to either scare people away from this field or really convince the sale to sort of go through, because this is a difficult piece of land. And a group of friends decide to solve this mystery. It's actually the last in a series of books called the Penny Books, but you can, I think, still kind of come in, even though it's the last one, it doesn't really matter. And I'm looking forward to getting to this one, finishing it. And then one of my all-time favourite reads, I've moved on to children's books here, but this is one I still love to read as an adult every autumn, and that's Heaven to Betsy by Maud Hart Lovelace. This is a collection with two books together, Heaven to Betsy and Betsy in Spite of Herself. I adore the Betsy Tacy books by Maud Hart Lovelace. I first read them when I was little, and they're just very important books to me. I think they're some of the books that made me who I am. And they're about a young girl called Betsy. They're set in the early 1900s, and they're about her life in small town Minnesota, her friendships, and they start when she is really very little, but progress right up until she's married in her first year of marriage. And as the series progresses, the difficulty level of the reading progresses too. And these ones I love to read as an adult. Heaven to Betsy starts off with Betsy returning from her summer holidays, facing all sorts of changes. Her family is moving into a new house, which she finds quite upsetting because she's very attached to their old house. And she's also ready to start high school for the first time. And it's really all about the adventures she has in high school, how she learns to still be herself as well, but also she starts to get interested a little bit in boys in this book, and it's about really finding her feet as she enters adolescence. They're such charming stories, I can't recommend them enough. They're some of my favourite comfort reads, and yes, I just love returning to them. There's a lovely bit in Heaven to Betsy too, where they speak of a particular tradition of making something very special for the first day of school. They make muffins always for the first day of school, and that was something my mum started doing for me when I was little, sort of inspired by the Betsy Tacy books, is that she would make muffins or something extra special for my first morning of the first day of school. And I think I still like to make muffins at the beginning of September because of that, even though happily I don't have to start school anymore. Some traditions are still nice to hold on to, and that's one. But yeah, this makes a lovely read for the start of back to school season. And then this is a book that my mum read recently and was really praising, and it sounds like so much fun. It's called Beswitched by Kate Saunders. And it says, Flora Fox gets on the train to boarding school and finds herself in 1935. She's trapped in the past at Tally-Ho-tastic St. Winifred's, where she has to speak French at breakfast, wear hideous clothes, and sleep in a freezing dormitory. How will she ever find her way back to the 21st century? I love the premise of this. I think, I was certainly guilty when I was young of romanticising the past and of boarding school type fiction like the Chalet School books by Eleanor Brent Dyer and the Mallory Towers books by Enid Blyton, thinking how lovely it would be, whereas the reality would be horrendous, I'm sure. And this just sounds like it's a great ode to schoolgirl fiction, but told with a modern slant and in a very interesting way. And I do always enjoy time slip books too. So I'm definitely intrigued by this one. And I think it sounds like a fun one for back to school. Then another real classic of my childhood is All of a Kind Family by Sydney Taylor. And I absolutely love these stories. They're set in New York City, and the first story in this, it's almost like a little collection of short stories. And the first one in this is all about the public library in New York City, and one of the young girls in the family is horrified because she lent her library book to a friend and the friend never gave it back to her. So she has to tell the librarian that she's lost the library book and she will have to pay for the library to get a new one. And the family is very poor and she feels terrible about this, but the librarian is very kind to her and her siblings. And it's just such a sweet story. And even if I don't always read all of the book, in September I often return to that story in particular, because it's just such a favourite of mine, and somehow you just think a lot of libraries and bookshops and things like that as we go into autumn. So this is a real favourite. Mum and I actually visited the Tenement Museum when we were in New York City a few years ago, and that's the sort of district where this book is set. I think really sadly because of COVID the museum closed last year, which is such a shame. I will check on that and I'll put any information in the description box down below because it's so worth visiting. So much fascinating history to that district, and we had a wonderful time visiting it, and I'm really sad to think that it has closed. But many people who loved the all-of-a-kind families went to this museum to get a real sense of what life was like. And yeah, I'm just really sad that it's closed, but I'll look it up and see if that really is the case. Really recommend the books anyway. And then the final children's book that I'm hoping to read myself in September is The School with a Difference by Yvonne Meynier. And again, this is a book that my mum picked up and was reading. She read about it in the Scribbler magazine. You may remember I told you about that magazine a few videos ago, and she thought it sounded fascinating, which it does. It's set in France during World War II. It says, "I have a big piece of news for you. For the first time in history, children are being asked not to go to school. So opens a mother's letter to her daughters away at their summer camp in September 1943. For the place is France under the Germans, and the school year which follows is like no other." And this book was very much based on the author's own experiences and her own letters to her daughters in France during the war. And it's just full of really interesting period detail, and I can't wait to read this. I think it will be fascinating. So this isn't in print anymore. You can see it's a vintage copy, but I think hopefully I will really enjoy this, and I think it will be one worth seeking out. And then finally, a couple of last choices, a non-fiction choice and then a poetry choice. You know how much I love the Poem for Every Day of the Year books. A Poem for Every Autumn Day starts off at the beginning of September. So this is definitely one to pick up if you also enjoy reading a poem every day, which I think makes such a lovely bedtime routine or morning routine, whatever you fancy. And yes, I really recommend this set of books. They go now all through the year, and it's time for autumn. And then in September, I always think of apples. There's an orchard not that far from us, and Mum and I went there just the other day. We were having a look at the apples to see if they were ripe yet. Not quite, but some of them are very nearly there, just a week or so, and they really will be ripe enough to pick, which is exciting. But yes, like I say, I always think of apple picking time as September, and this book seems an appropriate choice to me. Orchard, A Year in England's Eden by Benedict MacDonald and Nicholas Gates. Although this starts in January, it really is a focus on an orchard from January through to December, and it's told month by month, so it would be quite fun to read the September chapter, for instance, in September. but it really narrows in on an apple orchard and about all of the wildlife that is supported, that finds its home as well in the orchard. And it's all about the passing seasons as well. And I think it was really lovely read, and I definitely want to read the September chapter this month. So anyway, those are my suggested books for September. Obviously, if you read every one of these, you'd have a very busy September just reading. But I hope that you will find some inspiration from these titles. Let me know if any of them in particular appeal to you. Let me know what books you have lined up for September. What are you excited to read in the month ahead? Thank you so much for watching. Do give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and you can subscribe to my channel by clicking on my face that pops up on the screen over here. I'll be back again on Friday with the August book club discussion, the Comfort Book Club discussion. So really excited about that, and hopefully see you again then. Goodbye.